Okay, lecture on eye, ocular adnexa, auditory, and operating microscope. Starting at the beginning of the chapter in your textbook, the format of the eye and ocular adnexa subsection has subheadings for eyeball, anterior segment, posterior segment, ocular adnexa, and conjunctiva. There are typicals, incisions, excisions, repairs, destruction type categories, but also some that are unique. For example, the subheading eyeball includes categories for both removal of the eye and removal of foreign body, although you would expect to find all removal codes in an actual removal category. So a little different. The coding shot is really good here for you guys to remember. I remember you to use modifier 50 for bilateral if your procedure is performed on both eyes. Otherwise, use your RTs and LTs as much as you can, okay, to show your rights and your lefts anytime that we have bilateral there. If we start with the eyeball and the actual removal of the eye, some of these bold terms might be new to us. I'm not really sure how deep you go in anatomy and physiology if you learn about evisceration or enucleation or exenteration, okay? So reading those three bold terms here at the start and paying attention to the differences between the two and seeing those different codes is going to help you. Secondary implant procedures is something that you can read through on your own. Nothing really in depth there. This chapter is pretty short and sweet, even though it's got a really long title. Removal of foreign body and the fact that the slit lamp was used. The slit lamp, there's a picture at the bottom of the page there that shows you kind of have to lean up and put your chin on the bar, and then they, will go on either side of the eye. It's very piercing, light there that comes in through. Reading about the slit lamp is going to be important to you because it can affect your code selection. I would say really reading through the next few pages. Of course, all your bold terms are good to review again from MedTerm or like an anatomy and physiology class. When you're talking about the anterior segment, looking in the cornea there, the keratoplasty for reasons like aphakia or pseudophakia, dealing with lens implants or not after cataract surgery is important. And I do have a video about that too that you can watch in the content this week. And feel free to look up any of your own videos. It really is, if you take the time now, to really understand what we're going to code, okay, it's going to make you that much better of a coder. And you don't have to take the time later. On the next page, talking about the iris or the ciliary body is something that can be talked about. Removal of lesions here for treatment of glaucoma. Those are things that we talk about there. Lens and cataracts is where we talk about the ECCE or the ICCE. So the extracapsular cataract extraction or the intracapsular cataract extraction is talked about there. And we do that a little more in advanced as well. Extraocular muscles, whether we need to have muscle misalignment repaired. So we talked about that, and that's a very small paragraph in the chapter there. Orbit eyelids, I guess the biggest thing with your eyelids is really making sure that we pay attention to, oh yeah, there's these modifiers that can tell us if it was the upper left or the lower left, if it was the lower left or the lower right, okay? That can really help us when we're doing some of these procedures on the eyes. They give us some pictures there of entropion and ectropion, things that were also talked about in medical terminology, and I would assume your anatomy and physiology as well. And then we get into the ear. And so the eye was pretty simple. The ear's pretty simple. I would say the biggest thing to deal with would be when we talk about the external ear here on that page, removal of foreign body, and that paragraph there in that heading. It says, with the shape of our ear, it's really easy to see how foreign bodies and things like cerumen or earwax can become lodged, okay, in your external ear. When a foreign body is removed from the ear, the code is based on whether the general anesthesia was used or not. Ear lavage or an ear wash. is the unilateral removal of impacted cerumen or earwax using irrigation or lavage. Removal of the cerumen with instrumentation is reported with a different code, okay? So we use 69209 for removal of it. 69210 is with instrumentation. And again, if it's bilateral, you use modifier 50 to show that. Myringotomy and tympanostomy really are very, very common here when we talk about the ear, and especially when we talk about kids. Tympanostomy is the insertion of the tubes, or the PE tubes, the pressure equalization tubes, for kids that have chronic ear infection and issues with drainage. That's something kind of that we have to grow into, is those properly functioning. And so when they don't, sometimes we need that help with those tubes. And so we can read about that as well. With the inner ear, really the labyrinth and the labyrinthotomy, excisions with the ectomies, introduction using a cochlear device implant. That was just on one of the medical shows that I watched on TV last night. They were doing that, and they showed that surgery. Temporal bone, middle fossa approach as well. And then at the very last page is the operating microscope. So we can read about that. And I think since, this is a pretty short video, I also want to do the CPT notes. So if you'll pause me and get your CPT book and open it into the female genital system. Now, I know this isn't female genital chapters that we're covering, but you'll find at the very end of the female genital system, so just a page or two left in that section, and it's kind of green for the 2019 book, you'll find the endocrine system attached, okay, right after labor and delivery and OB area. So you can pause me and get yourself to that area. To do CPT notes in your CPT coding book, there isn't a lot, but I can run through them really quick here. The endocrine system, as you can see, starts at the end of the female genital system section. So it doesn't have its own color or its own area here in the CPT book. It's just kind of at the end of the female. You see incision, excision. I kind of have a note next to 60210 and 60212. It's a partial thyroid lobectomy, unilateral with or without the isthmusectomy, and with contralateral subtotal lobectomy, including the isthmusectomy. I have kind of starred there, and I wrote not often. You don't see that procedure done very often at all. And then if you turn the page to the laparoscopy, this is something we've noticed before, but it's always good to really star. Surgical always includes diagnostic, paying attention to that rule there. And then we get into the nervous. And I really, really want you in the nervous, there's a page that has pictures of the brain. I'm going to hold this up. I want you to turn to that page in your CPT book, okay? And with this picture on the side, that picture right there, there's kind of a slit pie looking, opening kind of right there, okay? And I have a line that I drew right there where the yellow cerebrum ends on that picture. And then there's kind of a white space or a hole where then the cerebellum underneath it is. Right in the middle is the tentorium. And so I want you to draw a line and write the word tentorium. Okay? It's Tentorium. Tentorium. Okay? Is what falls kind of right in that white crack in our picture. And everything above, so there's a line and then I drew an angle all the way, an arrow all the way up above, is the word supratentorial. Supra would be above the tentorium. Okay, so supra, S-U-P-R-A, T-E-N-T-O-R-I-U, or I-A-L, supratentorial, okay, is that area. And everything below the tentorium, I wrote a little arrow below, okay, is infratentorial. everything underneath the tentorium. So infratentorial is INF as in Frank, RATENTORIAL. So with that picture right there, that sagittal section of the brain and brainstem picture, where there's a little white slice opening is the tentorium. Okay, that's where it falls. Everything above that is supratentorial. Everything below that is infratentorial. Okay, and you say, okay, well, why do I need to know this? When we get to some of these codes, if you turn the next page where the nervous system actually starts, you will find some of these codes, and you will find, for instance, look at craniectomy and craniotomy. The very first code underneath there says craniectomy or craniotomy, exploratory, supratentorial, above the tentorium. Infratentorial, below the tentorium. Okay, so if you turn the page back and look at your picture, if they're talking about something in the pons or the medulla area or just the cerebellum area, the cerebellum is infratentorial, it's below. If they're doing anything talking about the ventricles, the thalamus, or the cerebrum, that is supratentorial. So they might not say, okay, a provider might not say to us and really explicitly note for us in the record that it was infra or supra, but they might say that they were in the cerebellum. Okay, so now I know and I can pick my code. Okay, so make sure you have that marked on that picture for yourself. Twist drill, burr holes, or treffins are listed there. The craniectomy and craniotomies are listed there. There isn't, again, a lot to note. The surgery at the skull base is very important for you to read. You see a lot of bold terms there talking about the approach procedure, the definitive, and then the repair. And we talked about that in the lecture as well. I want you to turn to page 418 or code 61720. 61720 is stereotaxis, if you see this. And I need to put a video on stereotaxis. I think we do it a little more in advance. But stereotaxis is something that I don't think the chapter hit on, and which means we hit it a little more in advance. But I want you to know about it. Stereotactic biopsy, stereotaxis, and the use of it is navigational or computer assisted. It's like GPS. Okay, is what this is. And every single time we use this equipment, we will bill for this or code for that equipment. Stereotactic use and the use of stereotactic or computer-assisted navigational type procedures is very expensive. It's equipment that isn't always had by facilities. So when we do use it, we need to make sure we recoup and are charging for it. Okay, we paid a lot of money to have that procedural or computer-assisted navigational guidance. We need to turn around and bill every time we use that, okay, so that we can recoup that money. So stereotactic computer-assisted navigational procedures, the add-on codes on the next page, 61781, 61782, and 83, you can see the plus sign in front of them. Okay, we added on to a main procedure. Okay, so you can note that as well. Those are very, very important. And we'll talk about it more later too in the fall. I'm just flipping here because I honestly am not sure that there's any other notes to be had in the nervous system. We might have some that we make next year. Eye and ocular adnexa, as I flip through that, there's nothing really crazy that happens in this chapter either. Everything's pretty straightforward. And then in the ear, let me see, I don't think I have any other notes. I don't. And then microscope or operating microscope then is listed 69990 as well. Do read. It is really important. If you find that code, it's the very end of the auditory chapter with the dark green kind of color bar there. in your CPT book. The operating microscope is super important. You really need to read that. Look at all the codes that are listed there. Do not report the operating microscope in addition to procedures where the use of that operating microscope is an inclusive component. And you're saying, well, what are